to Yoga with Kylie, and these 3 really important exercises for back health, back care if you are suffering from any low back pain. So grab yourself a block and a ball. They will be handy just because it gives you a little bit more feedback so that you know if you're cheating. You can put those to the side. We'll begin lying down on our backs. And once you're on your back, bend your right leg in and extend your left leg long. And just bring your hands onto your ribs to begin with. And see if you can start to sense the breath moving laterally. So breathing out to the sides and into your hands. And at the same time, feel the breath moving backwards and down to the floor. So the back of your rib cage also expanding. As you start to do this, you might notice that the rib cage ever so subtly kind of tilts, so it helps to stack the ribs a little bit more over the pelvis, which really helps with stabilizing that lumbar region of the spine. It takes out the rib flare. And once you feel like you've got that 3-dimensional expansion happening with the ribs, take your hands and slide them now into that lumbar region, so where your lower back is. And notice that there's a bit of a gap between your lumbar spine and the floor. Now, if you're really arched away from the floor like this and the ribs are flaring, then just ever so subtly think of drawing the ribs a little bit more towards your pelvis, or breathing into the back rib space a little more, so it softens out that flare and creates more of a connection to this front body. And so notice the gap that is there between your lower back and the floor. We're going to try and maintain that through this exercise. So you're not going to squish into the floor and you're not going to pull away from the floor. So your hands are there to give you that little bit of reference. Now start to brace through the belly. And that feeling of bracing through the belly is as if you're resisting somebody trying to poke their fingers into your belly. So as if they were going to try and tickle you. So you can even take one hand and kind of play around with what you would do if you were bracing for a tickle. Notice how it's kind of an eccentric or a widening expansion out. And we're creating that connection between the ribs and the top of the pelvis. Now see if you can maintain that as you lift the elbows away from the floor. Now, for some of you, this might be enough, just holding on to this expansion, or this eccentric expansion rather, through the belly, or the bracing feeling, while you still breathe into the back body. If you want to go a little further, next phase is just to lift the head and shoulders a touch. So it's not a curl up. I'm keeping my gaze towards the ceiling. I'm keeping that bracing action through the belly, and I'm keeping space between my throat and the chest. Good, and then release down. So we're going to hold it for 10 seconds each time. Breathe into the back body, brace through the belly, lift the elbows away from the floor. So when you're bracing, also make sure it's not like, oh, really pulling and clenching things down. Just a subtle brace. We don't want too much effort. Maintain that brace as you lift your head and shoulders up, holding for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and release. Now, if at any point during that 10 seconds you've started to lose form, then release out of it. So only do as much as you can maintain the form, and that might initially be only 5 seconds, and that's okay. So again, create that bracing action, lift the elbows, breathe into the back, and lift your head and shoulders. Try not to tuck your chin in or round the spine. Think of just lifting straight up. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good, release down. Now as you lift up, also pay attention to nothing happening in your lumbar spine. Let's do one more with the right leg up. So again, brace, lift the elbows, lift the head and shoulders. Notice if the lower back changed. Hold 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Release. And let's switch sides. So this is a really good exercise for the transverse ab, the deepest abdominal layer, and also the multifidus, which co-contracts, and that's a spinal muscle, a deep spinal muscle in the back. So again, breathe into the back body, try and create that connection, rib cage to pelvis, like you're resisting somebody tickling you. Lift your elbows, lift your head and shoulders. Notice if the lower back changed. Holding. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good. Release down. Now, if you've already started to lose form, then relax and don't do any more. So you want to start with doing as many as you can maintain the form. So if 10 seconds is too much, maybe do 5 seconds. At the moment, we're going to do 6 rounds. You might start with just 3 rounds. So really modifying to your level at this point in time. Again, create the brace, lift your elbows, lift your head and shoulders. Holding. 10, 9, 8, 7. You should still be able to breathe. 3, 2, 1. Release down. And that breath, really breathing into that full circumference of the rib cage every time, so it doesn't just become like an upper chest or throat breath. Good. Rib cage to pelvis, elbows lift up, create the brace, and lift up. Notice the lower back. Notice the breath. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Relax. Legs out long or any comfortable position. Just take a moment and relax. And then roll onto your side, and we're going to do some side plank variations. So first stage will be knees bent, feet together, elbow to the floor, and you're going to try and pull that elbow in towards your waist so it really lights up the latissimus dorsi and this whole lateral side body. Now, once you're there and you've got that action through the shoulder, lift your hips away from the floor. Now, notice that you haven't rocked the top hip back and that you're not kind of sagging in the waist. So everything one firm straight line. Good. And then lower down. Let's try that again. Press down and lift up. And really think of carving that bottom leg into the floor. Another variation is to open the top leg as well, which gives you a little bit of activation through this top leg glute. Good, and then release down. Let's do that again. So we're roughly holding for about 10 seconds again. And again, you can modify, make it shorter if you need to. Pull and lift up. 10, 9, 8, 7. Really check your alignment. Make sure everything is stacked. Make sure the shoulder is hugged into the socket. Good. Release down. Let's switch over to the other side. Elbow to the floor. Pull that elbow in towards the waist. And just check where the alignment is. Sometimes we set up and we end up with the shoulder too far forward when we come up. So you might even just lift up, make sure that the shoulder feels really comfortable before you begin your sets. Now think of that same bracing action that we just had. So think ribs towards pelvis, breath into the back body, push down and lift up. And then notice if you've started to tilt back, really stay in that lateral body. So we're starting to really activate through the core, but also the bottom glute, pelvic stabilizer. Good, and release down. Now if this starts to feel easier, then you can start to make it a little more challenging. So next option would be to have one foot bent, one foot straight rather, one knee bent, so you're in this position. And again, we're still looking for making sure that everything is in that lateral line. We're not rocking back this way, and we haven't sagged the hip down to the floor. So you're trying to lift that bottom hip up as high as you can and really push that bottom knee into the floor. Good, and then release down. And again, 10 seconds holds. When that starts to feel easy, you could maybe come into 2 straight legs, which would look like this. You're going to carve down into the floor and then lift up. Now this bottom leg, so in this case it's my right, I'm going to really think of pushing into the outer edge of that foot to light up this bottom glute. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good. Now, once that starts to feel easy, the next phase is to do a little rolling action into plank and back out again. Now only attempt this if you really can hold that side plank really well for 10 seconds and for 3 sets of 10 seconds on each side. Then you might be ready to do this next variation. So the next variation, you're going to think of your shoulder being the pivot point. Your spine doesn't change, and it's almost like your spine is on a skewer, like a barbecue skewer, and it's just rotating on that. So there's not going to be any floppiness through the spine. So this variation will look like so, same start as before, pull and lift up. So you're in your side plank. Now, the first stage might be just tilting the tummy button towards the floor and then rotating it back up. Tilt the tummy button towards the floor and rotate back. Next phase might be tilt the tummy button towards the floor, roll into plank, and then spin the feet and roll back into your side plank, lower down. Now notice as I did that rotation that the body didn't sag. So I'll show you what it would look like if it was gonna be a little bit saggy through the middle. So we're here. If I rotated and my hips dropped and I ended up here, this is not what we want. And then I'm coming back and I'm kind of hanging in the shoulder and then I'm here, all right? So you got to keep that bottom hip up nice and high and just think of pivoting in the shoulder so the spine doesn't change. Let's try it on the other side. So again, one foot in front of the other. This time it'll be my right leg in front because my left leg is going to be the one that I carve into the floor. I'm going to pull that elbow in, lift up. Keep up nice and high. Rotate over that shoulder into your plank. And then rotate back, keeping the hips up high. And then do that again. Rotate, plank, rotate, side plank, and release. Now that is a very advanced version, so please stick with the earlier variations until you feel really proficient with that. Third exercise is our bird dog. And for this, I like to use a block and a ball because it keeps me really honest. Particularly if you're doing it without somebody's eyes on you, it's really easy to tilt the spine and to arch. So the block will go against the hip that is not moving so that if you do lean out, the block is going to fall. So block against the leg, ball goes into your lower back. And you might need to do a couple of rounds of cat-cow just to find where your neutral spine is, because many of us kind of exist in more of a posterior tilt or more of an anterior tilt. So if you move between those two extremes and then just find your neutral place, which is the midpoint between the two, then there should be a nice little place for that ball to sit. So bird dog, you're going to push the ground away, slide the left leg back because that's the one that's not resting on the block, and then start to lift the leg up. But think of pushing through the heel as you lift up. So notice I'm not going for height, I'm really going for length, and I really want to feel it in my butt and in the hamstring muscle in the back of the leg. Now if you can, next phase is arm reaches out. So phase 1, 10-second hold. Nice full breaths into the back body. Nothing else moving. Ball stays in place. Good, and release. Phase 2 would be to add a little bit of movement. So I'm doing the touch of the hand to the knee. Now what often happens in this exercise is people round the spine. Okay, so we're not going for a rounded spine. We're trying to isolate hip motion and shoulder motion, which is why the ball is really handy. So place the ball on your back, push the ground away. Again, let's slide the left leg back, lift it up. Right arm reaches forward. Now without losing your ball, see if you can bring the hand and the knee towards each other underneath the body and then reach them back out. So you're trying not to lose the ball or disturb the block. And if you feel yourself leaning into the block a little more, see if you can hug in that right hip to keep it away. Good, let's do one more. and then rest. You might come off the hands for a second, give a little roll out, and let's try the other side. So block is this time going to go up against the left hip. Find your neutral spine, so you might do a few rounds of cat-cow first. And cat-cow also a really good exercise just for mobilizing into the spine. And then once you've found neutral with the spine, place the ball on your back. Slide your right leg back along the floor. And again, think of breathing into the back ribs. Create that bracing sensation that we had earlier. Raise the right leg up. Push out through the heel as you raise the leg up. So we're not going for height, we're going for that activation in the butt and the hamstring. Left arm forward, 10-second hold is phase one. Really breathing into the back rib space, keeping the ribs towards the pelvis, and keeping the ball nice and still. Good. Release down. Now, if that feels okay, then you can go into phase two, which is where we add the movement. So ready? Slide the right leg back. Again, connect the ribs to the pelvis by breathing into the back rib space. Raise the right leg up, maybe the left arm forward. And then see if you can touch hand to knee under the body or get close to touching, and then reach back away. Now, as you do this, really pay attention to not leaning into your block or losing the ball. This is a really good one to keep us honest and really find what we call proximal stability. Good, and then release. Come off the hands for a moment and give them a little wriggle. Now, another version is to draw basically a square with the arm and the leg. Which is also quite good for right and left sides of the brain to work out what my leg and my arm are doing at the same time. So same setup, breathe into the back rib space, find that neutral spine again, slide the right leg back, lift it up, extend your left arm forward, and then try to draw a circle with the arm and the leg, or a square rather, but it usually ends up being a circle. And again, you're trying to stay away from the block. Good, and release. Let's try that variation on the other side. If you like, you can also add the ball back onto the back, just to make sure that you're not stealing this movement from the spine. So find that neutral spine first. Breathe into the back. Connect the ribs to the pelvis. Create that bracing sensation we had earlier. Extend the left leg back, lift it up, right arm forward, and then create your square or your circles without losing your ball and without holding the breath. Good, and then release. Come off and give your wrists a little roll out. So there you have it, 3 really good exercises for creating stability through the spine and for really emphasizing what we call proximal stability. Proximal stability is basically that ability for us to stabilize here and mobilize through the limbs. And if you are in any sort of pain in the lower back, these are really fundamental exercises that you want to get really good at in order to help stabilize that whole area. There's one other movement that is really helpful, and that is to create a pulling action, which is going to basically activate the latissimus dorsi, which helps with what we call the oblique slings in the back. So if you have a TRX at home, you can do this with a TRX. If you don't have a TRX, what you can do is just grab a couple of blocks and we'll create a pulling action in extended child's pose. So you'll bring your fingertips around the ends of the blocks, push into the blocks and pull back, and you're going to keep that pulling action as you sit your hips back. And so it helps if the blocks are on something that doesn't slide. Once you get all the way back, you can come back up, reset, pull, and sit your hips back. And you'll notice that this is also toning through the core a little as well as the triceps and that lateral border of the body. Good, pull and sit back. Good, release, pull and sit back. Good, last one. Good, and relax. So there you have it, some really good exercises to help you if you are perhaps suffering or you have in the past suffered from low back issues. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for practicing with me.